Hello, welcome to my channel, and thank you for watching. Um, the image that you've seen and that you're looking at now, the caption reads, Ritual Slaughter in Preparation for a Coming of Age Ceremony, Inyoni, KwaZulu-Natal, 1986. This image elicits some criticism from people who say that, you know, that there's something incorrect about the way that this ritual slaughter is being conducted, and that perhaps it should have been done differently. I've, as a photographer and as somebody growing up in deep rural areas, have witnessed quite a few ritual slaughters. Um, I grew up on a cattle farm, and I grew up part of in with my dad coming from um, so-called uh, tribal land. My community lived there, and we eventually had to leave that land when for with apartheid special development policy. So I'm somewhat familiar, although I don't claim at all to be an expert on what is meant to be ritual. It really isn't a part of my culture as such. Um, my grandparents and parents chose a more sort of Western modern is not the right word, but westernized way. And I can't even claim Western culture either, somewhat cultureless, if you like, in terms of like cultural tradition. So, but this is not an uncommon sight. And I suppose I'm assuming that what people take exception to is, the dogs being allowed to feast on the blood um, from a recently slain um, animal. But I I have great reverence for people's cultures and for this act, which is uh, it's a tradition that's come down for as long as people can remember of and indeed the Bible is replete with stories of sacrifice. Many cultures, indigenous cultures, sacrifice around the world, and this community, this family, whom I'm still aware of, continue to live and have prospered in this region, in this area. I was privy to be a witness. I was invited to be a witness to the preparation and the actual coming of age ceremony. I have an essay, a huge essay that I mean a extensive number of images that I produced around this event, and have an ongoing relationship with this family. Um, so, I don't see it as distasteful. I see it as part of the cycle of life. We ourselves, many of us, eat animal product of some sort, unless you are vegetarian or vegan, who I know to be in the minority globally. So, um, back in 1986, for the average South African, black South African in particular, living on slave wage labor prices, incomes that we are still subjected to actually by this to this day, we're not in a privileged position to be able to support the pet industry by buying pet food. Pets ate what they, the scraps that they were able to get, and this was a treat for them in some ways. So I'm not going to, I don't really see this as something that one needs to get hung up about. I see something quite holistic here, and knowing that the situation for this family has improved vastly in post 94. Um, Gives me a lot of hope for the future, with notwithstanding all the issues that South Africans face. So I'll move on to the next image, hopefully a somewhat more image than one you're looking at now. The caption reads, A wedding party departs the home of the bride in an informal settlement of Sundumbili, adjacent to the Homeland Border Industrial Park of Isitebe, KwaZulu-Natal, 1986. Um, quite a few words there. Informal settlement. Sundumbili is the name of this. Um, uh, Sundumbili is actually a township, but there was at that point a huge adjoining informal settlement next to the township of Sundumbili, which for English speakers means twin palms. and and the township of Sundumbili was created to accommodate people for the border industrial park of Isitebe. And Isitebe, again, for the English speakers, means a grass mat that would be placed under a grinding stone. So the grinding stone, the allegory was that the industrial park was in the KwaZulu homeland, KwaZulu government and the apartheid state saw this industrial park as a kind of a grinding stone, the metaphor of the grinding stone, and the the, the grains coming off the grinding stone onto the isitebe that captured, the product of the grinding stone. So that's my limited knowledge, but I stand to be corrected. But people came and found a foothold for life, even in these meager resources that were created. And Sundumbili, Isitebe rather, continues to struggle as an industrial park because it was created in a position that wasn't entirely suited for where one would ordinarily place an industrial park. And these apartheid created industrial parks that were created to exploit cheap black labor have all struggled. Qwaqwa, my memory, the one in the Eastern Cape is completely derelict. I photographed it for another project. It's like something out of a dystopian movie that it would be a setting for some real sense of complete dystopia, the absolute gutted industrial park. This one continues to limp along, and I have hopes that it will be resurrected. It's a very necessary resource. I live 10 kilometers away from here. A necessary resource for employment for people, and if people could get a better living wage out of that, that would be really helpful. I remember how hopeful my father was when this industrial park was coming along, that there would be work created and more resources for his business that he had at the time, and there was that to a degree, but the social ills that emerged out of the lack of resources that were, there was a clinic, there were schools, there were, various uh, welfare projects, but not nearly enough to meet the needs of the people. So, in that, this image, in a way, expresses the hope that people have to continue life, and marriages, very dignified marriage, emerging out of these conditions. And I would like to imagine that these people have continued to varying degrees to thrive. That marriage, that couple, hopefully. I'll just add by saying that I arrived at this wedding at the invitation of a good friend of mine, Manfred Dunn, who's now deceased, unfortunately, who worked in a nearby paper industry as an engineer back then, and was also a member of the soccer team. And the groom was that you don't see in this picture was part of the team, and invited Manfred to his wedding. So I was there not as an official photographer or anything. I just came along as an observer, and with the um, with the consent to be able to make a few photographs of a situation that I wouldn't ordinarily easily access. So the final image, the caption reads, retired farmers and their grandchild, Steenkoolspruit, which is close to Newcastle in KwaZulu-Natal, 1994. And I photographed this for the Association for Rural Advancement, the only, I think, commission I ever did get from them, and went out and documented some of these rural communities that they were beginning to work with. And I particularly love this image of this beautifully constructed adobe house with a bit of a porch on it, some garden furniture, and this beautiful retired grandparents and their grandchild. And it captures for me some of the graciousness of country living, that even with the limited resources that people had had prior to 94. This was on the cusp of 94, and you see the more modern house in the background. So the older couple would have been, the grandparents would have still been in these much more traditional houses, which you are so hard to find now. And hopefully younger generations rebuild, even if it's, holiday homes in the style, because there's as we know, people who pay attention to sustainable living know that there's something to be said about this kind of adobe, the coolness of an adobe home and a thatch roof, and there's just something tranquil and really in tune with the environment about a structure like this with its stone foundation, well built, beautifully, probably by this old gentleman lighting up his pipe in the background with his beautiful jersey. You can see I'm a rural boy who loves the rural areas, especially when I see people able to live with some integrity and dignity in those areas, and as we should all have the opportunity to do. So I'll end it there and say thank you for watching. More information on myself and my work can be found on my website, a link to which, including my blog and email address, can be found in the video description below. If you like this talk, remember to click the like button and press subscribe. It helps the channel grow.